Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 88. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Wednesday, Steelers Nation. Even though it is early February and generally a pretty quiet time of the year for the Steelers, obviously Super Bowl week, a lot going on down there in New Orleans. We had a jam-packed show today, Dave. Got a ton of stuff on Cooper Kupp. My first mock draft rolled out yesterday. New reporting about the relationship between Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson, and a fantastic Shrine Bowl roundtable and recap with a ton of the crew that was down in Texas this past week. So, Dave, a ton to talk about.
Absolutely, and we had a good almost hour talk with the roundtable, so everybody should stay tuned for that. Appreciate the job everybody did down in Texas, as well as Mobile for the Senior Bowl as well. So we're getting deeper and deeper into draft season. Obviously, we've got the start of the new league year about 6 weeks away, and wherever you want to, we got a lot to talk about. So wherever you want to start, Alex.
Well, let's start with Cooper Kupp. You guys know that during the Monday show, the Myles Garrett trade request broke in the middle of that. We reacted to that news. There's still really no clarification on what's going to happen in the future. But later that evening, Dave, Cooper Kupp, not a trade request from him, but the Rams said, you don't got to go home, but you can't stay here. Kupp himself breaking the news. The Rams intend to trade him. Kupp said he disagrees with the decision. He wanted to stay, finish his career with the Rams, but the Rams apparently have other plans. And so naturally, Dave, the question becomes, will Pittsburgh have interest? There was reported interest last year as Pittsburgh was doing their league-wide search for a wide receiver. The Rams decided to hold on to their assets, their pieces, make a playoff push, which they did. But now they're looking to dump Cooper Kupp. And so could he wind up in Pittsburgh?
First and foremost, the timing of this, along with the Myles Garrett thing with Super Bowl Radio Row week getting underway and all like that, probably not overly surprising. Is this Cooper Kupp trying to get out in front of this? Would have this had leaked out anyway, kind of thing. Fact of the matter is, it sounds like Cooper Kupp's not going to be a member of the Los Angeles Rams in 2025. And when you talk about him specifically, you have a player that will turn 32 years of age in June. He has averaged missing 6 regular season games a season over the course of the last 3 years. When he is healthy and he is on the field, he is still a guy that can I believe, truly help a team overall. But when you look at the ability for the Rams to trade him, I think you got to start with the contract overall. This is a guy that's set to earn a total of $20 million cash in 2024. $12.5 million of that is a base salary. He is due a $7.5 million roster bonus on March 15th. Which is obviously right around the start of the new league year. You would think if the Rams had their druthers, they would want to get him moved before having to pay that $7.5 million roster bonus. Good luck with that. Being able to move the full $20 million. Now, I think there's a little inconsistency about how much of that $7.5 million roster bonus is fully guaranteed. Originally, Over the Cap, I think, had that number at $5 million. I think since all this news has come out about Cooper Kupp, I think they've changed that now to the full $7.5 million. Regardless, I think the Rams are going to have to eat some of, if not all of, this roster bonus to be able to move Cooper Kupp. I would be surprised if they're able to move that full $20 million that he's owed in 2024. Now, they obviously could pay that $7.5 million roster bonus and then continue to try to move him ahead of the draft. I would not be surprised if that ends up happening unless they are willing to trade him before that $7.5 million roster bonus is due, with the stipulation that they will eat at least 5 million of that. So I think that, and he's under contract for 2026. I believe that year totals out at 19.85 million, and I believe 5 million of that 19.85 million is due as part of a March 2026 roster bonus. But we're talking about a guy that's obviously up in his career. Does he have 1 year left? Does he have 2 years left? As far as being able to contribute to a team, teams are going to have to take that into consideration if they deal for him. Because, I mean, look, this could end up being a 1 year ad for any team. And if that is indeed the case, you're probably going to want that 2025 year to be as cheap as possible. He is a lot more attractive to more NFL teams if all they have to do is take on the $12.5 million base salary in 2025. I could see the Steelers interested in him. And look, the Rams in most recent times here have shown that they are willing to eat some roster bonus to get rid of players. Allen Robinson II, who obviously was traded to the Steelers, they ate some of his, I believe, roster bonus or some of the salary that he was due to facilitate that trade. And I believe Robert Woods, when they dealt him, they had something along the lines there. The only way that I see the Steelers being interested in Cooper Kupp is if the Rams were to eat that full $7.5 million roster bonus. In other words, he would cost the Steelers $12.5 million base salary in 2025. As far as compensation goes, the most I could see the Steelers parting with to get him, assuming that all they had to do was take on the $12.5 million base salary, would be at a fourth round draft pick. However, I would think that the Steelers would say, we'll give you a 2026 fourth round draft pick because of the notion that they're more than likely to come away from this free agency period with the balance sheet on compensatory picks of maybe picking up a fourth round pick. Other than that, if we're talking about 2025 draft picks being involved to acquire Cooper Kupp, I see it more in line with like a fifth round pick, something along those realms. Now, this is a guy that probably best suited as a big slot in Pittsburgh. I think still willing and able blocker as far as that goes. Once again, I think if used correctly in Pittsburgh and at the right price, you can make that work. But as we say all the time, price and cost are everything, especially when it comes to the Steelers. Could I see this coming to fruition? Yes. But the only way I could see that, Alex, is if they only took on $12.5 million for 2025, and if the compensation was, let's say, a fourth round pick in 2026, or a fifth or a sixth round pick in 2025.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And Kupp, by the way, turning 32 in June. So just from an age standpoint, like you said, signed through 2026. The compensation shouldn't be much, as you indicated, just given the contract and his age. And listen, when you're shopping a player and you're pretty open about that, it really hurts your own leverage. And teams know that, you may end up getting cut if they can't find a trade partner. And so no one's willing to overpay. And there's not going to be a huge demand for Cooper Kupp the way that there is for Myles Garrett. Like, teams will check in, teams will call, but the number of teams who offer firm trade proposals are generally pretty slim. Even in free agency, guys that actually, even top level guys that get firm contracts, it's usually only a couple of teams. And so I imagine a couple of teams that will check in, maybe some trade discussions, but in terms of actual legitimate trade interest, it may only be 2 to 3 teams. So the market won't be driving up his price. You personally, Dave, do you have interest in Cooper Kupp? If you were in Omar Khan's chair, would you be on the phone trying to make a deal happen?
If I could get it done once again, and I think he's a little bit more marketable than you do, especially if a team only takes on 12.5 million and not having to sell the farm as far as compensation. I think he can obviously still play. I think he can help a team win a Super Bowl. I think he can. He's obviously not a number one wide receiver. He's probably borderline number two in the right system at this point. I do think he can help a team. I do think he can help the Steelers. But once again, I'm 12.5 million is really the limit that I'd be willing to spend on him. You talk about the Steelers wide receiver room as it sits currently. You've got obviously George Pickens, and we'll see obviously what happens with him. There seems to be more of a consensus right now, as we get deeper into this, that maybe they will end up holding on to George Pickens in 2025. All right, who do they have behind him right now? You obviously had Calvin Austin come on and do some good things this past year, and you can build upon that. But even so, is Calvin Austin going to be a 800, 900 snap player for you? I don't think so. You've got obviously the draft pick tied up in Roman Wilson, who will play all of 5 snaps, and you obviously hope more as a slot receiver type guy that you can get that guy up and running and integrated into your offense. We both fully expect this team to draft a wide receiver or go a free agency or trade route to add to that room moving forward into this offseason. And even if they go free agency trade route, they're still going to probably add to that room during, in the draft. But I mean, who else, what else do you really have, in that room outside of maybe bringing back a Ben Skoranek for, to help on special teams? That room needs an infusion of bodies that can contribute right away. And I think Cooper Kupp can do that. 12.5 million. Short answer is, do I think he's a fit in Pittsburgh? I do, based on the way that room sits right now, but only at a max of 12.5 million. It would basically be a 1-year contract, because I can't foresee them paying him that 19.85 million in 2026. And obviously, I'm not giving up the farm as far as compensation goes. If I could get him, if I felt good about getting myself a fourth round compensatory pick in 2026, I might be willing to part with that. But otherwise, I'm looking at more of a 5th round pick. But I do think he's got ball left in him. But I think you got to be cognizant of the fact that he's probably going to miss games for you in 2025. But if I could get him for 12.5 million and a 5th round draft pick, I think I'm pulling the trigger on it, Alex.
Yeah, the price tag, assuming you don't have to deal with a roster bonus and the Rams either eat that or they pay it or whatever the situation is, that doesn't scare me off much. I mean, 12.5 million for a receiver is not a ton of money in today's landscape, where I know you're looking at just average yearly values, but those guys are getting, well over 30 for top end guys. Not that Cooper is that anymore, but the point is it's relatively inexpensive. Pittsburgh has plenty of cap space. How much are they even spending on receivers collectively right now? They're all on rookie contracts. It's not very much. That's not the concerning part to me. It's the combination of, he's about to be 32. He's not been healthy. Played 9 games in 2022, 12 games in 2023, 12 games this past season. I think he had an ankle issue or something like that. And he's a big slot receiver at this stage of his career for a team that is a heavy 12 personnel, 13 personnel, 2 receiver, multiple tight end offense. Are you going to get enough snaps out of this guy to justify this? Pittsburgh didn't use the slot receiver a whole lot this year. They even had trouble getting George Pickens consistently involved. I think the combination of factors, the fact that you would have to give up a draft pick of some sort, even though I agree it's going to be, I think a 5th rounder is probably what Cooper Kupp goes for. If he is traded, it's not going to be expensive. But all those factors combined, there's no question this team needs a receiver. They're going to add a receiver. Everyone knows that. I think it'll be a veteran more so than a high draft pick. But I don't think Cooper Kupp is the right answer.
I mean, I think at $12.5 million, if you could get look, you have to integrate him into what you're doing offensively, obviously, and at his age, he is more that and ability, that big slot guy. Could you carve out 500 snaps for him, especially when you've got a guy like Roman Wilson that you're trying to integrate more into this thing? But I mean, let's face it, we still don't know much more about Roman Wilson other than his college tape, and there's still going to be an integration development process because of him missing almost all of his rookie season there. And Calvin Austin, how reliable of a slot guy is he? You're more of a piece that you're going to move around, and once again, not a guy that's going to be able to take on 800 snaps, I don't think, in this next season there.
Well, can Kupp do that? I mean, can Kupp stay healthy enough to play 800 snaps?
I think he can play to 500. I'm looking at him as a 500 to 600 snap guy.
Okay. I think from a health standpoint alone, you have to bank on that and give him the construction of the offense. I mean, obviously he'd play, you'd find a role for him. Here's my other concern. I mean, as you said, if you were to trade for Kupp, all you can really assume is getting him for 2025. Yes, he's under contract for 26, but you can't assume, especially at that salary, that he's going to be on your roster in 26. So if you're Pittsburgh, you got George Pickens expiring deal. Last year was rookie deal in 25. Same with Calvin Austin. Now you throw Cooper Kupp, who you can't assume will be with you in 26. That's a lot of uncertainty about what your receiver room looks like in 2026 with Pickens, with Austin, and with Kupp. Do you want to have to potentially go into next offseason having to retool the entire wide receiver room?
Well, I'm looking at this as a veteran guy to help you transition into these next guys, which are hopefully Roman Wilson and whoever you take in the draft. So you got to have somebody out there. This room's got to be better than it was last year, even if it is a 1-year rental.
Yes, I agree. But I think if you go with a different veteran who hopefully can give you more than 1 year, you can bank on more than one season. That's a better route to go.
Sure, I'm not saying this is the end all do. Stop the presses, make the deal right now. I mean, we've talked about Devontae. There are more than likely going to be better options here, right?
Right. So why, if you're Pittsburgh, wait, just punt on Kupp, and if he's still available end of March and you miss out on top flight receivers, maybe you look back at Kupp then.
Right. I'm not doing this before the roster bonuses due. And you would assure yourself anyway by sitting there and watch the Rams maybe sweat on this a little bit, get closer to the draft. But as we've seen, there's no guarantees, even though you might have your 2 or 3 guys circled in the draft, there's no guarantee that you're going to get those guys. And you still have an unknown about Roman Wilson on top of it. So, and also when the list of free agent wide receivers not named T. Higgins isn't great, right?
I think there's some names out there, especially if you consider that Devontae Adams is likely to be cut. There's Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, although he kind of falls in the Kupp as a big slot. You do wonder kind of about schematic fit and opportunity and those types of things. I've always been a fan of DeAndre Hopkins, even though he's older, but he should be cheaper. I mean, I think it's a pretty decent group of free agent names, and I think you go a veteran because this draft class, there's some first-round guys to talk about, but after that, it falls off pretty quickly. This draft class, we've been really spoiled by impressive rookie classes of receivers. 2025 does not have what the past probably 5 classes have offered in terms of high-end talent and great depth throughout that rookie class.
Right, but I feel like you're trying to paint me into saying that this is the one and only that they, I mean, is he a fit?
Yeah, I mean, it's a 2-part question. I'm not trying to paint you. I'm just trying to say, like, if you're Omar Khan, are you actively trying to shop a deal for Cooper Kupp?
I'm picking up the phone and making the call early to start gauging the interest in that. And then I'm obviously, if they're not willing to part with him, I really foresee this going past the new league year with the Rams, unless they can, unless there's a team that's just sold on him that has already a better, maybe one number 3 away, and know that they can get Kupp right now without having to pay that roster bonus. That's the only way I see that he moves. I just think that this is guy that's got to be a guy on your list specifically past March 15th, leading up to the draft. After you've had you get the combine out of the way, and you get a good sense of what you're looking at there. Free agency, obviously, once you get through the first 2 weeks of free agency, that thing usually cools off as well too. But yeah, I think you get a call out of the way just to see what the Rams are looking for, and add him to the list of potential players that you might be willing to add.
Sure, nothing wrong with that. I just personally don't have much interest in Cooper Kupp. I think there's better options, more reliable options from a health standpoint, ones where I don't have to give up a draft pick. Do you call? Sure. You do wonder how motivated are the Rams to move him? Could they eat some of that salary as part of an agreement? Even before that roster bonus comes due, say, yeah, we'll eat half that roster bonus and we'll trade him off in early March, and because it sounds like they're looking to move this guy pretty soon, or as soon as possible, which is not going to be tomorrow, this week, but hopefully, probably in their mind, post combine.
And look, they had enough interest to supposedly have interest in him last year before the trade deadline, right? So there probably is some level of interest there still.
Yeah, this is not to say that Pittsburgh won't do it. I don't know if they will or won't. It wouldn't surprise me if they were still checking in, still having interest. I do think last year, and you're right, Jake Glazer reported, I think it was in October, that Pittsburgh had checked in on Cooper Kupp. I think part of that was due diligence. Pittsburgh was trying to look through every couch cushion for receiver help. They were striking out everywhere on Devontae Adams, on, of course, Brandon Ayuk. They just, Christian Kirk, although I think they were checking in on Kupp before Kirk ended up getting hurt. So it felt like more, we just need to have some due diligence, and this guy makes sense. There aren't a ton of options out there. The Rams are struggling. Would they be interested in parting ways with Cooper Kupp? I don't know how far those trade talks got, but certainly, could we hear about Pittsburgh still checking in? Absolutely. Just me personally, I don't love the fit. I don't love the risk of the player and the health and the production as of late. It's just not something I would strongly consider doing.
As far as probability goes, I'd probably give it, I don't know, about a 40% chance, of it happening. And then once again, I can almost guarantee you that if the Steelers did trade for him, it's 12.5. They're not going to pay Cooper Kupp. They're not going to inherit more than $12.5 million in salary.
Right. So that either means they're going to have to work out a deal before the roster bonus gets done, where the Rams are eating that, or the Rams just have to eat it as that roster bonus clicks through. And then he becomes, frankly, it might be easier for the Rams to trade him after that roster bonus is due, because then that whole problem is solved for other teams. There's no negotiation to be had there.
If they got to that March 15th roster bonus, what you'll probably hear is about them restructuring that to spread out the cap liability with the intention still trying to trade him before the draft.
Could they just cut him before the roster bonus is due?
Sure, but obviously you get nothing for it, and you're still
But you don't have to pay the roster bonus. That's what you get.
Well, I think it's guaranteed, right?
Oh, I think $5 million of that is guaranteed. Right?
I think it's actually 7.5. Like I said at the start there, I think Over the Cap just changed the report on him.
Okay, because I thought someone did Rappaport say it was only $5 million, but okay,
it was right. Up until like 48 hours ago, and then I think over the cap changed. Let me just double check on that, because I looked at that yesterday. Okay, they switched it back to $5 million now. So they had it at $5 million fully guaranteed. Then yesterday I checked it, they switched it to $7.5 million. It looks like they switched it back to $5 million now.
Okay, so there is a little benefit, but odds are they're probably not going to cut him, because the value of saving that $2.5 million is probably not so immense that they're going to want to do that. They'd rather just try to still see if they can work out a trade.
Right.
So it just, last year per PFF, 459 slot snaps, 272 wide. I don't want to say he can't play out wide. He's got size, he can block, but he really has been a slot receiver. I just wonder what the value of that's going to be in Pittsburgh right now.
All
right, so that's the latest on Cooper Kupp, but certainly, like I said, would not be surprising to hear Pittsburgh show some level of interest as a team, at least checking in and checking up on the Cooper Kupp situation. All right, Dave, let's go to some more reporting that came out yesterday and heard for a couple weeks since the season ended, just kind of some more generalities between Russell Wilson, Arthur Smith, a rocky relationship, those two not always seeing eye to eye, not on the same page. Gerry Dulac of the Post-Gazette finally offered some specificity to what some of those issues were, and he outlined a contrast between the two Bengals games. The first one where Russ played his best game of the season. Pittsburgh won in a shootout, 44-38. Russ threw for 3 touchdowns, 400 plus yards, and as we noted at the time, Dave checked out a lot of plays. Pittsburgh did not, smartly so, they did not run into the teeth of the Bengals, run down front, and they passed in those situations. Now you look at the season finale where Pittsburgh came out very run heavy. That was their game plan. And Dulac's reporting that Arthur Smith basically took away Russ's ability to make checks and calls and change the play at the line of scrimmage, and that created some friction between the two. So, what is your reaction to that reporting of Smith limiting some of the autonomy that Russ had, and maybe that being an issue for the offense late in the season?
The digging into actually what Dulac wrote and all, I find myself wanting more context there. What, because obviously Russell Wilson past that first meeting against the Bengals, he was still checking stuff at the line of scrimmage, right?
Yeah, there's still examples. So it's hard to, like you said, to know for sure. Was it fully taken away? Could he only do checks you know, to can plays that were called in the huddle? How much freedom did he have? Could he just check the different runs? It was different sides. It's hard to say for sure.
Right. What is the context there? Was he basically told, look, you got to stop, changing the play in its entire, you can't handcuff any quarterback to call a play in one play in the huddle, go to the line of scrimmage, look at the front, look at the coverage, and be locked into that play, right?
Yeah, I can't believe that was. I wouldn't believe that Smith was so restrictive that Wilson just had to, whatever the play was called, that's what they ran, no changes at all. I think that would be ludicrous for any OC to do, especially with a veteran like Russell Wilson.
Are we talking about more of the more full autonomy type stuff of literally just, checking to a totally different play and maybe even one that wasn't tagged at the end of the huddle?
Right, right. Or, run the pass, which we saw in the Bengals game, because the Bengals, they put down their 5 down front. We talked about it at the time. Pittsburgh threw against it 6 or 7 times. Their only rush was on the goal line, and they had a ton of success. And it was a big reason why they won. It was a smart game plan. We didn't see that against the Eagles. We didn't see that against the Bengals in the rematch.
And then, obviously, as the day progressed yesterday, people were saying, well, Dulac says sources. Is Russell Wilson one of these sources just trying to distance himself now, saying, look, not everything that went on, in that second half of the season, specifically those 5 games there, are all on me because I didn't have the autonomy to check us out of some things, that maybe I would have had I been given more, is it, the question is, and who knows, is this Russell Wilson just trying to, because look, I thought the interviews that he gave at the Pro Bowl were, status quo, was Russ being Russ. Yeah, I'm still part of this team until I'm not. I still like to go back and all, but is this Russ leaking stuff out the backside to kind of help, release him to some of the negativity or ineffectiveness of this offense? We'll never know. That's why I kind of say it's hard just based on what Dulac reported. I'd like to have more context there.
Right, or at least Russ's camp would probably be a potential source here because he's got that big kind of PR group that's traveled with him, and maybe somebody is talking to Dulac about that. For whatever it's worth, though, even if we accept this report as the truth at face value, there was friction between Smith and Russ. Russ has done nothing but say, I want to return to Pittsburgh. So how bad could that relationship have been if Wilson is clearly eager and wants to return to Pittsburgh, knowing that Arthur Smith will be his OC in 2025?
Well, I think let's back up to, towards the end of the season there, and at a minimum, I think we both can agree there's at this point, there was some sort of friction between Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson, right?
That seems consistent with not just Dulac's reporting, but a lot of reporting throughout the season. There was some obstacle there. Sure. Yes.
All right. So how much was that due to, audibling, difference in game planning, whatever? I wouldn't expect Russ to say anything else other than saying, I'm willing to return, because as we went through the list of teams the other day, and we'll see how this shrinks as time goes on. It's not like his 32 teams are going to be interested in him. So you want to make sure you don't slam any door. And look, Russ is a master at this kind of stuff, right? Of attempting to say all the right things. So I would be surprised if he said, yeah, I'm really interested to see how free agency plays out here, because I was kind of dissatisfied. He's just not going to shut that door. So I just view all the things that he said as things that you would expect a guy of his experience, of the kind of player that just trying to keep his market options open here.
I get that, and you're right. I mean, Wilson's great at PR and saying all the right things, and he's even admitted he's an eternal optimist. But I mean, if he really had a bad relationship with Arthur Smith, I mean, sure, he wouldn't sit there and say, "Yeah, I don't like Pittsburgh. I'm not coming back. I don't want to be there." But he wouldn't. I mean, he has clearly been gung ho, 100%. I am all in on wanting to return to Pittsburgh. If there was a big issue and block between him and Smith, I feel like his language would be a little bit softer, a little bit different. Not to sit there and say that I want out or I'm going to leave, but he would just sit there and say something other than what he said. Because I mean, what he has said has been all in on Pittsburgh, right?
Right, but on the flip side, he wants to make that present as an option that he has to use in negotiations.
I think you can do that without. I mean, if anything, he's not even entertaining other possibilities. If you want to use leverage, you sit there and say, I might leave. I might go somewhere else. Potentially, I'll go reunite with Pete Carroll and use that if he wants to try to create some leverage between if Pittsburgh wants to keep him or not. So I think it could go the other way, too. I think by saying, I want to return to Pittsburgh, I don't care what other teams are doing. It almost hurts your own leverage by saying, I'm a one track mind right now and I want to return to the Steelers.
Personally, I don't view that. I just believe this is classic Russ, to be honest with you.
So you think there could be a lot of issues between
I wouldn't
Smith
say
and Russ?
no. I wouldn't say. Look, I don't think anything that whatever that friction may or may not be, or to what level with Arthur Smith, I don't think it's irreconcilable. And I do believe that the two, even if you were to hook both of them up to a lie detector test and say, at the end of the day, do you think you two could work together and win some games in Pittsburgh in 2025? Both would say yes, and both would be willing to go down that path again.
Okay. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if a new OC, new quarterback coming together from different teams had some things to work through. And Smith is a run-oriented guy, and so maybe there's always naturally some friction with quarterbacks who, of course, want to throw the football and put up points through the air. I mean, do we believe the report on Smith really kind of stripping down some of Wilson's autonomy? And if so, why would he do that whenever it clearly worked against the Bengals? The offense was humming; they were 10-3 and drawing Super Bowl buzz.
Once again, I would love to have more context. I would love. Too bad Gerry Dulac, his appearance on Rich Eisen didn't happen now, instead of last week or whenever it happened. Right.
Well, sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, just because it's so loosely, and knowing what we know about it's hard to imagine Arthur Smith saying, you can't change anything. It would be better to have some kind. We'll never know, right? We're likely never, unless Russ signs somewhere else and gets asked specifically, were you handcuffed, from that second or first Bengals game on, how handcuffed were you? How run first, are we? And look, there were obviously, during those final 5 games where you were like, man, quit just banging your head up against, against the brick wall. They're just thinking that all of a sudden it's going to come crashing down. So, Do I believe that there's some validity to this, the way Dulac has it framed specifically? Yes. Do I believe that can't be worked through? No.
Let's take the report and what makes the most amount of sense. Because, like you said, we still saw late in the season Russ make some checks at the line, correct?
Right.
So let's assume that Smith didn't sit there and say, you have zero autonomy, whatever the call is the call. You're just hiking the football. Let's assume the report means that Russ couldn't change from a run to a pass. He couldn't make those big changes in terms of the outlook of the play. Could still do slide protections, could still change direction of runs, could still kill or can to a second play, but just couldn't kind of go rogue and have that freedom. Okay, they're presenting the 5 down front. Let's go check to a pass here. Why would Arthur Smith want to do that? What is the benefit of doing that?
Yeah, I have no great answer to that.
Right. I mean, is that now? Some have speculated, is that a directive from Mike Tomlin of, hey, we need to run the ball. That's how we're going to do it. We got to control time of possession, keep the defense or keep the opposing offense off the field. We got to protect the football. Is this a philosophical thing from Pittsburgh more so than Arthur Smith himself?
I could see putting handcuffs more on a younger quarterback. Let's say even if it was Justin Fields in there. But I mean, Russell Wilson's played a lot of ball, right? He, the only thing I can think of is maybe he checked completely to something else more than enough times that weren't successful enough, where he probably should have stuck with something. In other words, he wasn't seeing it correctly, and Arthur Smith thinking, if we would have stuck with, the play call here, we would have popped, we might have. Was there enough instances where he fully checked out of something that maybe wasn't called, that didn't work, that they had a lot, and I'm not just talking 1 or 2 times, that got under Arthur's skin?
Or checks that led to turnovers. Pittsburgh was turning the football over more during that 5-game collapse, and that's not how Pittsburgh wins. And so that they go into a shell and say, we got to go back to just, nuts and bolts, run the ball, take care of the football, because we're turning the ball over too much and it's costing us games. Not that Russ threw a ton of them, but there were a couple, obviously. And there were running back fumbles as well. Najee in the Eagles game, most infamously. But I wonder if that kind of put Pittsburgh back into a shell as things started to go wrong for this team, this offense.
Look, we'll agree on this. They should have tried to open that offense more later in the season.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nothing was working at all. I think when you're not running the ball, you're not winning in the trenches. Your tackles had a really tough end of the season in pass pro with Dan Moore, Broderick Jones. Maybe that also made Pittsburgh more conservative. We're taking too many sacks. We're in too many negative situations. It's hurting field position, hurting us on 3rd down. So, you try to be a little charitable to these reports, but Pittsburgh at their best was whenever Wilson was able to have some of that autonomy. He's a veteran quarterback. You wanted to start him for a reason, and that veteran presence and control over the offense, I think, is one of those benefits you get when you turn to Russ as opposed to sticking with a Justin Fields. So hard to say for sure. I would just hope that if Russ came back, for a year or two between him and Arthur Smith, the more that you're together as OC, as quarterback, that's a really close and important relationship. The more freedom you get, the more trust that grows. If Russ can go through an entire training camp, which he didn't get to do in 24, to kind of work through install and really build this offense up from day one, that will give you more autonomy, more freedom, more trust between OC and quarterback. And even if Justin Fields returns, same thing. 2nd year quarterback OC, because last year was so much about foundational stuff. Everyone's so brand new to the team. Hopefully that trust and that freedom will grow with time together.
And look, if we take what little is in those couple of sentences from Dulac, people can apply whatever narrative push they want to that. If you're if you're extremely pro Russell Wilson, you could say, what the hell is Arthur Smith doing? In other words, if you're anti Arthur Smith, you could twist that against him. On the flip side, if you're pro, or if you're negative Russell Wilson, you could frame that as, well, Russ did too much, right? There's just,
And if you're anti-Mike Tomlin, you can sit there and say it's all
Right.
Tomlin's doing, and it's
Right.
just the offense being too conservative.
That's why at the start of this conversation here, I said, man, it sure would be nice to have more context to this. And obviously that's asking a lot. We're wanting both sides to spill all the beans to help make us help us give better, more information to speculate or expand upon.
Another hypothetical, I know it's difficult to answer with any level of certainty, but how much freedom do you think Arthur Smith has to run the offense as he sees fit?
This goes back into the whole, Mike Tomlin philosophy of how much, he really seems to enjoy these rock fights, right? It seems like Mike Tomlin plays the game, or once games played, of don't turn the damn football over. Let us roll that defense out there and let's win the game 19-17.
Sure.
It's easy to think that the main directive here is let's run the ball because we don't have a great great wide receiver room overall. We have built this thing to be able to try to, and we're getting into the winter months. We should be expected to run the ball better, yada yada. So I could see at the top Mike Tomlin say, do whatever you need to do to not turn the football over.
Which AKA means run the ball a whole
Right.
lot, which Pittsburgh did. I do think Smith has more control than people might assume or think, especially in light of these reports where some people could sit there and say this is all Tomlin putting his thumb on the scale to keep this offense super conservative. I think Tomlin certainly has a level of influence. I think certainly in situational football, I think that mic'd up that happened in that Seahawks game in 23 was really insightful into some of the communication that Tomlin has between him and the OC in terms of Tomlin's not saying call this play, but hey, I want play pass here. I want a short throw here, occasional kind of tips and general directions. And that's kind of seems to be the way Tomlin runs things. But, if you hire an Arthur Smith, a veteran OC, Pittsburgh wanted a veteran, they wanted an outside name. It's hard to sit there and think that Smith would have taken the job if he had like no control over how this offense was going to get run. I mean, to compare that to Matt Canada, who was in the young OC, first time play caller in the NFL, in over his head. Randy Fietner, first time NFL play caller, Tomlin's buddy from their Arkansas State days together, one of his first hires when Tomlin got hired in '07. Smith's not that guy. I mean, he's a veteran, established OC. I think he's got more control. He seems to be pretty well compensated as well. Some of the reports that are out there. I think if you hire that guy and Smith takes that job, it's going to come with the understanding of Smith's going to have more control than the guys before him.
Right, right. But within that, there you go back to the conversation. Does Mike Tomlin micromanage too much?
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say for
game.
sure.
Now, I'm not saying that 12 times a game Mike Tomlin's telling Arthur Smith what run the ball. But I can foresee that happening 2, 3, 4 times a game.
Right, but is that micromanaging, or is that just like a head coach who should have some input on some situations?
Right. There's definitely a balance there. Right.
Right. And so how well are they walking that line? That's probably really hard for us to say from the outside. But I just think that Smith does have more flexibility.
Sure, I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying that you do have to wonder what the overarching gameplay, the overarching philosophy that Mike Tomlin has, and how much does that stress an offensive coordinator?
Well, I think it got the philosophy is there. There's no question. Run the ball, take care of the football, play great defense. And that was reflected in hiring Smith himself. They didn't go out there and get this whiz kid, pass game, young, up and coming OC. They got Arthur Smith, the most, to me, run-oriented offensive coordinator in the NFL, whose teams have finished top 5 in rushing attempts, I think, in all but one of his seasons as OC. And they were 4th this year, despite being hyper inefficient with their run game. And so the hire certainly reflected the philosophy, but just in terms of the game plan and the play calling and those types of things, I do think Smith has a lot of freedom.
All right, here's the thing, and Mike Thomas said as much. They've got to score more points. They got to open this thing up more moving forward. We've got to see this offense, if this team wants to compete and win a playoff game in 2025. whoever, we've got to see the offense take a leap, and not just a
Right.
small one.
But frankly, they're not going to open this thing up until there's confidence in quarterback, until Tomlin believes the offense is driving the bus and they're the stronger unit of the two, which is only going to come with finding some sort of, longer term option at quarterback. It's not that Tomlin's like incapable of giving the offense the keys. They did that in the Killer Bees era with Ben. The offense drove the bus. They were the aggressor. That one year they went for 2-point conversions at a crazy high rate and were briefly pioneers in that regard. But when, 2019 rolled around, Ben gets hurt, the defense played elite. They won games because of the defense. They went 8-8 because of that elite defense. Tomlin flipped the script and said the defense carries us. That's how we win. And we're going to play super conservatively on offense, protect the football, not hurt ourselves and let our defense win those rock fights. And so until the offense shows that there's confidence that they can consistently win games, then Tomlin's always going to have this philosophy.
All right, and we can speculate, and we'll see how much more comes out about this quote unquote, you know, not not a perfect meeting of the minds between Wilson and some sort of conflict or whatever. But Mike Tomlin's not going to probably meet the media again until what, the spring meetings, and we're not going to hear from Arthur Smith until who knows when, probably the draft, and then. Well, by then, obviously, we'll know what has happened to Russell Wilson and see if he's asked about him. At some point, these storylines are going to resurface in some line of questioning, but even then, I don't think we're going to get a level of an answer that satisfies anybody.
We'll hear from Omar Khan at the Combine, although I don't think he'll give much of an answer if they even asked about this type of situation. And if Wilson ends up going somewhere else, then the storyline probably just falls by the wayside because he's gone somewhere else, and they're presumably keeping Justin Fields, and that's where the focus will be. So we'll see. Still no clarity on that situation with the quarterback position.
All right, is this reports? Is this report surfacing and the timing of it? I mean, what's the level of concern? How much more time needs to be spent on it? The timing of it with the Super Bowl and needing things to talk about. Where does it? Obviously, it's topical. We've spent 15, 20 minutes talking about it here, but I just kind of wonder how much more we're going to be talking about it throughout the offseason.
It depends on if Wilson re-ups. If he re-signs, it remains a story. If he ends up going to the Raiders or anywhere but Pittsburgh, then the story really becomes nothing because he's gone, and maybe Russ will talk about it one day or whatever, but it will not be the focus it is right now.
All right, is this more about something or is this less about something?
It should be the name of our podcast, I think. That's a good question. I don't know. I'm just glad we got some details about the relationship because all we've heard until that report was they had a rocky relationship. They had hard conversations. That was from Albert Breer during the season. They didn't always see eye to eye, but there was zero detail on what that meant. And at least we have something to talk about in more detail right now.
I just wish we had more context as far as the handcuffing situation goes.
The other name of our podcast. I wish we had more context. That's the working title of the show. All right, Dave, anything else? Myles Garrett, like I said, real no update there. Browns reportedly not interested in wanting to trade Myles Garrett. We'll see where that takes things from there. NFL honors will be Thursday. TJ Watt up for DPOY. Larry Ogunjobi, Pittsburgh's nominee for Walter Payton Man of the Year, although I don't think we expect either to leave the ceremony with any hardware.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if any Steelers will really be highlighted with any awards, even play. It's just going to be a low key. I wonder if TJ Watt already knows the results. Obviously, he's got a baby due any time now, right? On top of it, I wonder if TJ Watt doesn't go, he's not going to win it.
Right. I was going to ask, will he even be there, as he famously did not attend last year's?
Well, he did. Didn't he go and then not?
He was in the area. He was like
in the area, then not go. It leaked out or something, I guess.
He shared a video of him and his wife. I don't know the marriage, but his spouse. They were sightseeing in some nearby location. is what happened with that.
What the way I take that is he found, he went,
Yes.
then he found out he wasn't going to win it and said, the heck with this.
Right, 100%. Because they know beforehand who's won these awards. I think Cam Hayward's Man of the Year award came out hours before the ceremony even occurred last year. That got leaked out. So yeah, Watt knew, didn't go. We'll see if he goes this time. No idea if he will or not. Wouldn't be surprised if he didn't show up because it's probably not going to be him this year. And again, he'll know before the ceremony.
Right. And I guess the other topical thing, and we've been talking about it for a little while here, is in maybe even by the time we end this podcast, maybe not, but I would like to think before Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern time, it seems like they're going to announce the Steelers in Ireland.
Yeah, that's reporting that it will come out before the Super Bowl on Sunday. It's the NFL's worst kept secret, been speculated, rumored for months. Pittsburgh, Art Rooney confirmed if they do play in Ireland, will be the home team. So they'll have 8 games in Akershire, 8 games on the road, and 1 in Dublin. They'll play at Croke Park. So Gerry Dulac reporting they don't know week, they don't know opponent. I don't think those things will get announced when the NFL makes the official announcement for Pittsburgh later this week. I think we'll just know that they will play a game. I don't think we're going to know opponent or week quite yet. The NFL loves to really slow roll and drag some of this news out.
Do you remember last year though, all the Brazil stuff and all? Didn't we know that was going to be? It's I feel like they'll probably know both teams, but I might be wrong.
Well, they've already announced some of the international games for the London games next year, right? But we don't know weeks or opponents on that. I don't think, right?
Right. We're probably not going to know the week for this Ireland game, but I'd venture to guess that we'll know the opponent.
Let me try to see if we found out last year. February 5th of last year, funny enough, 1 year from today, the NFL announced the Eagles as the designated team for the Brazil game. I'm just reading through if they know the opponent, if that was known, if it was going to be the Packers or not. And I'm not seeing anything on that.
Okay.
We know when that Packers game, or the Packers were announced as the Brazil opponent for the Eagles.
I don't remember the actual.
Looks like April 10th that came out. So
okay.
A little bit later.
Maybe we'll only know that and once again we've kind of thought this would be the case. So maybe they will only make it finalized that Pittsburgh will host in Ireland and not know the opponent.
There have been rumors the Packers will be the opponent, but nothing's been confirmed, and so we'll just wait and see. All right, Dave, I want to get to my 7-round mock draft. My first one came out on Tuesday, but before we do that, let's go to a roundtable with draft conversation that'll lead nicely into my first crack at my mock for the Steelers in 2025. So I had a great roundtable discussion from the Shrine Bowl crew of Joe Clark, Josh Carney, Melanie Friedlander, and Stephen Pavelka. Be sure to follow those guys. I'm sure we'll be hearing from them before the draft occurs anyway. Troy Montgomery was also in Texas for the event, but was not able to make the podcast today, so he's not there. But want to thank him and thank everybody for their work. So without further ado, let's talk to the Shrine Bowl crew. And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. As we said, top of the show, got our Shrine Bowl Roundtable, part 1 of our 2-part All-Star Game draft discussion roundtable of the week. We'll have the Senior Bowl crew on for Friday's show, but have a great cast to talk to today. Stephen Pavelka, Josh Carney, Dr. Melanie Friedlander, and Joe Clark. Troy Montgomery was also down in Texas, but he was not able to make the podcast today. So just want to shout him out for the job he did and the job all you guys did for your great Shrine Bowl coverage, which is not over. More interviews are going up on the site now, but you guys were down there in Dallas and Frisco to watch practice, interviews, see what the Steelers were checking out, and a whole lot more. So just to kind of open the floor, Josh, let me just start with you. Who were the biggest named guys that attended? I know Shedeur Sanders was there. He didn't participate, just talk to teams. Who were just overall, even if they may not go to Pittsburgh or be a fit for Pittsburgh, who were the top prospects down at this year's Shrine Bowl?
Yeah, I think you have to start with Kyle McCord at quarterback. Obviously, what he did at Syracuse this past year broke an ACC record, I think, that was previously held by Deshaun Watson. He was kind of the big name there at quarterback. Cornerback, Kobe Bryant out of Kansas. I mean, he was a 3-time All-Big 12 first-team player, so he was certainly a big name coming in. You had Nazir Stackhouse from Georgia, a guy that's started 4 years down there. Just there were a lot of guys, but I know that a lot of attention was focused on, obviously the Sanders name with Shador was there. Shiloh went through everything on the field, off the field. Dion came down as well for a few days, but on the field, I really think a guy like Taj Brooks was a big name that went out and made some plays. Ricky White, the third from UNLV, all Mountain West wide receiver, and he was also the special teams player of the year out there. Blocked 4 punts last season. He had a lot of buzz coming in, but if I were to pick one, I really think it would be Kobe Bryant was the biggest name down there, just for what he's done the last few years at Kansas. And he had a great few days, and then it seemed like he sat out the last few days because he had proven enough, but turns out that he had suffered some sort of injury. But I would say he was probably the big name. Nick Nash, I'm sure, is going to come up here from a lot of other people. He was a Biletnikoff Award finalist, but yeah, Kobe Bryant was the big name that a lot of people were buzzing out about down there.
Joe, was that you that talked to Taj Brooks and it told you that he had gotten Le'Veon Bell comparisons from the team? Was that you that interviewed him?
Yeah, no. So I was asking him, just what kind of players you emulate, and he volunteered. He goes, "Oh, the Steelers told me I play like Le'Veon Bell." He said he had met with them, and it was a productive meeting. They like his footwork a lot. He didn't flash as much in the game as I would have expected, but he also was on a team that generated almost zero offense, and he was really consistent throughout practice. And I think he did have like 4 catches in the game too, so he showed off his hands. And you could see I was watching closely then after he told me that. You can kind of see where that comparison comes in because he's a super patient runner with his vision. He was kind of waiting for holes to develop, and unfortunately for him, his offensive line didn't do him a whole lot of favors. But he's definitely, probably a later round name to watch for the Steelers, given the depth of this running back class. Probably a 4th, 5th, 6th, maybe even round guy, but definitely an intriguing name to watch, given that was pretty high praise heaped upon him by the Steelers personnel that was down in Dallas.
Steven, you've been to, I think, a couple of All-Star games now here. The Steelers Alex and I have talked a lot, and the buzz has been about the Steelers, specifically down at the Senior Bowl, looking hard and heavy at defensive linemen. The Steelers seem to be set to, I don't know, first, second round, take another defensive lineman in this draft. They like them a little bit on the longer side, 6'3", or taller, and usually around that 285 or greater mark. With that in mind, who impressed you the most? A couple of names down there as far as these defensive linemen went that kind of fit what we think the Steelers would look for.
Yeah, I mean, as far as actually participating in the Shrine Bowl like practices and all that, he didn't do it, but obviously you got to talk about Kenneth Grant.
Right.
One of the bigger names at the Shrine Bowl, and he did all the interviews and all that, but he didn't practice, he didn't play in the game. But my number one player coming into the Shrine Bowl, he's my highest of anybody that's on my big board right now. He's not the 6'3" mark, but he's 6'2" and a half, 307. Cam Horsley from Boston College. I talked to him. He's a great person, great personality. I wrote up an article on him with my interview. He has a connection to Dino from Boston College. And he might be the best run defender of all the IDOs in this class. And just the way I talked to him about handling double teams and his thought process through that, his thought process just playing the run overall. And he told me coming out of high school, he wasn't highly recruited, so he has a big chip on his shoulder for that. And you can just tell by talking to him. He has like a hard, gritty mentality. And we even talked about that's kind of like what the Steelers are known for. And he said he would love to play for Coach Tomlin and all that, and in Pittsburgh.
What about any thoughts on Zeke Biggers? Did you get to see much of him? I think he measured in 6'5", 320 pounds, 35-inch arms, 10 and a quarter inch hands. Tell me a little bit about Zeke.
Yeah, Zeke Biggers definitely impressed me at times. And he was another guy that I was looking to interview before I switched it to Tonka Hemingway. I definitely think he's somebody that obviously fits the size profile, and at times he definitely flashed at the Shrine Bowl. I wouldn't say any of the IDLs that did practice and did participate had consistently good practices and consistently good game. But Zeke definitely did stand out as one of the most consistent, I would say.
Mel, talk to me about your guy, Thomas Perry, down there from Middlebury. It's always interesting, I think, these all-star games to see the small school guys play up against that bigger competition. I think it's more valuable for them than it is for basically anybody else attending. You seem to be impressed. The O-line aficionados who follow these things seem to be impressed. Give me the skinny on Thomas Perry.
Honestly, I have a bias for Thomas Perry because I went to Middlebury undergrad. To see a Division III player get invited to the Shrine Bowl is really exciting. It's never happened before.
Mm.
He's a player that impressed from the very first day, and I think he's just a really interesting prospect. He's a little bit squatty for a guard, coming in at just under 6'3". And he's been training with Duke Manyweather, OL Masterminds. Interesting story how he got there. So he had a summer internship before his senior year at Yale. He's a super smart kid. And his dad sent an email to Duke saying, "Hey, can my son train with you for a week?" They sent him tape, and Duke was like, "How about a month?" So Duke is projecting him to go moving to center in the NFL. And I think that's probably going to be a more natural position for him. He played more center than guard in the Shrine Bowl, and he's got incredible strength. He told me he's planning to bench 225, 40 reps. He's already done 34. The thing that impresses me the most, though, is his base. He really has good footwork, good balance, and he can hold his blocks. So I don't know that the Steelers will be looking for a guard and certainly not a center in the draft, but I think some NFL team is going to get a steal if they pick him.
Is he going to go to the combine?
He has not gotten an invitation yet. Okay. I'm hoping that he will. But he's a very raw product, obviously, coming out of a Division III school. He is extremely smart. I think he's going to pick things up quickly, but he's got a lot to learn. Having said that, in the Shrine Bowl, he went up against some really impressive defensive linemen and held his own.
Is there a feeling about where he's projected to go? I know it's early, but Pittsburgh still could use a backup center if Nate Herbig does not get re-signed. There's not a whole lot behind Zach Frazier, Ryan McCollum, but depth is thin. Is he a day 3 guy? Could his stock rise higher than that?
It's hard for me to see his stock rising higher because teams like pedigree, and I think coming from such a small school, he's not going to catch as many eyes as he should. I think he could be a great day 3 value.
Okay. Yeah. Going to be a guy to certainly keep an eye on. Let me just open the floor, and I try to make these questions focused for one person, but I think Josh, you had mentioned it. Everyone kind of talked about Nick Nash down there from San Jose State, had a great season. Mm-hmm. Whoever wants to jump in, feel free, but how did Nick Nash look down there in Texas?
I thought the first day he looked pretty solid. They started out in one-on-ones, and obviously that's a drill that's going to be tailored more towards receivers. He looked good there. He flashed some good route running. He was snatching the football out of the air with ease, but then he kind of tailed off as the week went, where guys started to get used to him. Guys started to get their legs underneath them. He really struggled at times, against that press man coverage when guys got a little bit more physical with him. He did have a nice one-handed catch in the end zone. I believe it was in a 7-on-7 drill, where he made a play through contact. But there was a lot of hype about him going in, and I don't think that the hype or the buzz has faded any. But I think some people saw, okay, yeah, he dominated at San Jose State. He was rightfully a Biletnikoff Award finalist, but on this big stage, he wasn't as dominant day to day as maybe some people were expecting with the resume that he had.
Who is the best separator? I'll go to Joe on this. Who at wide receiver? Who is the best separator / route runner? I guess.
I think it was Efton Chisholm out of Eastern Washington. He was added, I think, the night before, 2 nights before practices started. I put in my practice notes. He was legitimately always open. His route running was absolutely incredible. I was up in the press box for the game, and one of the guys up there, I think it was actually the guy who was there to watch the officials, compare him to Julian Edelman, and a few of the scouts kind of nodded along with him. Just the way he gets in and out of his breaks it was so fun to watch. He was just legitimately always open every single time in team one-on-ones. His route running was really, really incredible, and his separation ability was a lot of fun to watch. He stood kind of head and shoulders above for me in that department.
Stephen, I'll give you a chance to either agree with Joe, and if you do agree, who would be the next best route runner slash separator of this wide receiver group that was at the Shrine Bowl?
Yeah, I would agree with Upton Chisholm. Kind of going off the Nick Nash thing, Upton Chisholm really stood out as the most impressive receiver, especially in the game, but in practice as well. This was somebody that you were watching and you're like, who is this guy at first? And then you're like, okay, this is a guy. Like he is somebody that's going to dominate this entire week of practice that he had, the time that he was there. And then in the game, you knew he was going to ball out. But I would say the second, I really liked what I saw from Antoine Juice Wells from Ole Miss. I had an opportunity to speak to him, and he wasn't even supposed to play in the game, but he did play. He had 2 targets, 2 catches, and 22 yards, which not really that impressive, but nobody on the West was that impressive, especially for receiver, and that's due to quarterback play. But I would say in the one-on-ones, I really liked what I saw from him. I liked what I saw from him in teams too. His hands are really strong, and as a separator, I like what I saw from him. And great conversation too in my interview.
Joe, let's go to quarterback, and obviously Pittsburgh could have some level of interest there, even though the quarterback class isn't particularly strong. Josh mentioned Kyle McCord being kind of one of the headline names there. What was your impression of McCord, and what other quarterbacks stuck out? I know that doesn't sound like Ethan Garber stuck out in a positive way. Looking over the winners losers list from the Shrine Bowl, Garber's pretty consistently on the wrong end of things. But tell me about McCord and other quarterbacks who stuck out to you.
Yeah, McCord kind of immediately from the first day was a little bit of a crop above, just the way the ball zipped off his hand, the ball velocity. His placement was really strong. I was hoping he was going to play in the game. He was warming up pre-game, but we didn't get to see him play in the game. But he was definitely the guy that, if the Steelers are going to take a Shrine Bowl quarterback, he would be the guy that would be number one on my list. Throughout the week of practice, I came away really impressed with Max Brosmer from Minnesota, but when the game came along, he struggled. But when we were watching, a lot of those team red zone drills, we were standing in the back of the end zone and kind of I made a point to try to, follow his eyes, see him go through his progressions, and he did a really good job. Like it was shocking to see how much the West team struggled in the game, given the fact that I guess they're going up against each other in practice, but, in red zone, that offense was, zipping the ball around, especially with Brosmer, a quarterback. They're almost getting a 1-play, 2-play touchdown every single time they're in red zone. Garber's, he had some moments during the week, but he was kind of inconsistent. There's one drive in team, he had 2 wildly inaccurate passes, then he zipped the ball right over the middle for, beautifully thrown ball, big completion. I think it was to Rivaldo Fairweather. But, the inconsistency there, and he really, really struggled in the game. But the 2 quarterbacks that I think I would be comfortable with the Steelers taking, a flyer on would be McCord and Brosmer.
Josh, you had spoken with Brady Cook from Missouri, and Pittsburgh's done seemingly a lot of homework on him. Granted, they're talking to all of these guys, getting to know a ton of these prospects, but tell me about Brady Cook and his week down there.
Yeah, he started out a little slow there. He fell behind. I think coming into the Shrine Week, he was going to be a guy that was probably going to be ahead of a guy like Brosmer, but he kind of fell off there early in the week. Was getting a lot of the second team reps, and he's a guy that he does his best work when he's on the move. And in some of these team sessions, these one-on-ones, he's got to kind of just stand there and deliver. Doesn't kind of get to play that backyard ball, doesn't, get to take all those shots downfield, especially in practice. I thought he showed good arm strength. He showed good decision-making and playing within the scheme, but there was night and day difference from what I saw during the week for him on the field in Denton compared to what he did the last 3 years at Missouri. I was hoping going into the week that he was going to have a chance to throw to Theo Weiss Jr., his receiver from Missouri, but Weiss had I think he said a broken thumb that kept him out. But Cook is a guy, I think he'd be better off getting into a room and getting comfortable, and he'll show what he showed at Missouri compared to that All-Star week, because it left you underwhelmed at times. He made some mistakes, he put some balls into bad spots, and you could tell there were moments where he wanted to, get out of the, that pocket in those 7-on-7, the one-on-ones, and use his legs and throw on the run, and you just can't do that in that setting. So I think that left some people, coming away a little bit underwhelmed.
Mel, it's hard to believe you've been to as many of these as looking back as you have now. You're going to end up becoming an executive director, I think, of Shrine Bowls if Eric Galco ever moves on there. You've got a pretty good run now at who your guy is coming out of the Shrine Bowl. I think even going back to what Pacheco a couple of years ago. I think normally your choices have been kind of skill position guys, running backs, wide receivers, maybe even a tight end in there. Who is Mel's guy coming out of this Shrine Bowl this year?
So I really appreciate the fact that you've let me go and represent you guys for 4 years in a row.
Is that how many? It's 4, right? Yeah.
It's this is my 4th season, and fortunately, Eric Galco, hasn't thrown me off the field yet. My guy this year, if anyone follows me on Twitter, you already know this, is Arizona's Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He's a running back, and he's going to be the steal of the draft this year. He actually profiles very well to me, in my eye, to Isaiah Pacheco, who in the 23 draft went in the 7th round to the Kansas City Chiefs, and all he's done is won 2 Super Bowls. So Krosky-Merritt's really interesting. He's a kid from a small town in Alabama. He, went to Alabama State for a couple of years and then wound up transferring to New Mexico for the 23 season and was going to do his redshirt senior season at Arizona. Played in 1 game, went for over 100 yards and a touchdown, and then sat the rest of the season because of questions about eligibility. He probably should have been allowed to play, but Arizona took the cautious route, and they didn't want to take any chances with the NCAA, which is really disappointing. But from day 1 at the Shrine Bowl, he just lit up the field. I think he's going to be a 3-down back. His pass protection is solid, and he's got good hands coming out of the backfield, but it's just fun to watch him run. As good as wide receiver Efton Chisholm is in his passing routes, Krosky-Merritt is just as much fun to watch when he's rushing. His footwork is fantastic. He can cut and move and find open lanes, and he's pretty tough and yards after contact. So that is my guy. That is my steal of the draft.
Stephen, would you agree with Ja'Cory being the top running back? And if so, or if not, who would be next on the list as far as running back goes?
Yeah, no, Ja'Cory really stood out, especially in the game. That's why he won Shrine Bowl MVP. But just overhearing the interview, it sounded like it went well because I was sitting right next to Mel. And then just in practices, it was like, okay, another person to keep your eye on. I would agree with the kind of little Isaiah Pacheco kind of play stylish there. But in the Shrine Bowl game, it was clear this is like the best player by far. He had the 2 touchdowns, and it felt like every run he had was for at least 7, 8, 10 yards. The second best, I would say, it's between Taj Brooks, Rocket Sanders. Those are really the only other 2 guys that genuinely stood out and made a good impression. Rocket Sanders has kind of that bigger build, even though Taj does have some more weight on him. But I mean, none of these backs to me really made a big impression. I felt like it would be like one guy really stands out and then might disappear for a little bit. But Taj Brooks and Rocket Sanders, I would say, were definitely up there as being the most consistent.
Josh, let me go to you and look at receiver now. I know we mentioned some names so far, Nash, Chisholm. Any other receivers stick out? Mumfield from Pitt, what was his week down there, since he's a local name people might be more familiar with?
Yeah, Konate Mumfield started out fast, and then he faded throughout the week. It also didn't help that he wasn't seeing the ball much. I don't think he saw the ball much at all in the game. He's a really good route runner. I know that we had the interview with him. He kind of models his game after Deontay Johnson on the field. I want to make that clear.
Right.
On the field, really good route runner. Just really explosive in and out of his breaks. There's the one highlight he had I think it was day one of practice. I can't remember who he was going against. It may have been Zy Alexander from LSU, but just a quick head fake off the line and completely froze Zy Alexander, left him wide open. But he's kind of undersized. Another undersized guy I kind of gravitated towards throughout the week was Jacoby George from Miami. That guy I think checked in at 165 pounds. So even he's kind of in that Tez Johnson mold. I know that a lot of people are concerned about Tez Johnson from Oregon, but Jacoby George, really good route runner, found himself open quite a bit throughout the week. I was really impressed with Keandre Lambert-Smith from Auburn. That's a guy that started out at Penn State, had the huge Rose Bowl against Utah, and then transferred to Auburn. He kind of disappeared this year. Auburn wasn't very good. They didn't have good quarterback play. But Lambert-Smith, he's the nephew of Cam Chancellor, former Seahawks safety.
Huh.
And yeah, he was getting open quite a bit. He's not a burner. He's not an explosive mover, but he just has a good feel for how to get open, has great hands at the catch point. I'm looking at the list here. Jackson Meeks is a guy from Syracuse that flashed quite a bit. Dominic Lovett from Georgia, another undersized guy, just a really good route runner, but he really concerns me at 5'9", I think 171 pounds. And then, Jimmy Horn Jr., I know that Mel had the interview with him from Colorado. That's a guy that he says he kind of mirrors his game after Antonio Brown, and you can see some of it in the route running. He made a lot of plays late in the week after getting off to a slow start. I know that when Deion Sanders showed up, I believe it was on Monday, you could feel Horn kind of elevate his game and really started to make a lot of plays. But my top guy there was Efton Chisholm. I mean, that guy was phenomenal, and he was a late ad on Thursday night into Friday morning. Had a half a day to pick up the playbook, and he dominated from start to finish.
Mel, tie a bow on the receiver thoughts here. Anyone else or any other commentary on what Josh said?
Well, it was the Colorado Buffaloes world, and we were just living in it, right? Obviously, Deion Sanders guys, he had 6 players at the Shrine Bowl this year. I wasn't sure if his 3 wide receivers would actually practice and play, and to their credit, they worked hard all week. Just got to make a mention of Will Shepherd, tall, lanky guy with an incredible catch radius, and he routinely was making good catches on bad throws down the sideline. Something to keep an eye on. LeJohntay, having a brain fart. Wester, also another Colorado Buffalo, a little bit smaller guy. Did a nice job getting open in the middle of the field, and he's got a quick release and quick feet. And then Jimmy Horn Jr., who I actually spoke to, is also a punt returner. He had a pretty quiet season because he had a couple different injuries. So I think he's probably going to drop a little bit in the draft, but he does have an invitation to the combine, and he's fast. So based on his combine performance alone, he may bump his draft stock back up a little bit.
Kobe Bryant, the top corner, I would guess, at this year's Shrine Bowl. Joe, 5'11", even 171 pounds, a little slight there overall, but has pretty decent arm length, I think, at 31 7/8 inch. I think he mainly played outside at Kansas, had limited kind of snaps throughout his career in the slot there. Talk about what you saw. Did he live up to expectations going in for what you knew about Kobe Bryant at the Shrine Bowl? And how was his stickiness? How was his press? How was his kind of tackling, his willingness, and all like that?
Yeah, I would say he exceeded the expectations I had going in for him. As you said, he's a little bit slight, and that was kind of something I wanted to pay attention to because, we've seen some of those corners struggle when he gets to the next level. But, I mean, it doesn't show up at all. Even if you go back and watch the tape from him this season, he's a super willing tackler. He plays aggressive at the line of scrimmage. As you said, he's got the arm length, and that gives him, the ability to knock away passes. He's got really great ball skills. He was the best corner. He only practiced the first 2 days, but far and away the best cornerback there. And I think through those first 2 days, he was probably the biggest standout. And he's got that cornerback mentality. He's chirping all week, even when he sat out the last 2 days. He was going after guys. He was yelling at the receivers. He was yelling at the receiver coaches. He's really got. He said when I talked to him, I asked him about his meeting with the Steelers, and he said, they want dogs, and I'm a dog. And, that really shows up when you watch him play. Like, just everything, the way he plays, his attitude. I was incredibly impressed with Kobe Bryant. And I think he's a guy that I would be surprised if he fell at a day 2 at this point.
Is he going to be an outside guy at the NFL level?
I think he could be the way he plays. That's where his experience is. He's made a ton of plays there, against high level competition in the Big 12. I wouldn't hate to see him add a few more pounds, but even at his current size, I mean, he was by far, he was shutting down everybody that he covered. So I think he can stick outside in the NFL.
Steven, who was the second best corner there if Kobe Bryant was the best corner at the Shrine Bowl?
Again, I'm going to give 2 names. Even these ones, I think, could rival and be the best guy at the Shrine Bowl this year. One of them being Robert Longerbeam from Rutgers. Really impressive guy. I know I had a tweet that did pretty well. Rutgers reposted it of him picking off, I think it was Will Shepherd in the end zone, or guarding Will Shepherd. But Robert Longerbeam had a great, fantastic week. But my personal favorite was Elijah Huzzie from North Carolina. This was somebody that at North Carolina also was a returner and had 2 punt returns for touchdowns. And he was locking, it felt like, everybody up for the majority of the practices. He was having a great week as one of the standouts. I talked to him, great interview. And then he got hurt. And that's when he withdrew himself. And then I don't really know the depth of that injury, but it was kind of just sad to see because he was having such a good week, and just talking with him, and he came back up to me after his injury and talked to me a little bit. Just a great overall person, great attitude. Elijah Huzzie was a real standout for me.
You have a quick update on Huzzie if you want. So, I was standing right on the sideline when he went down, and, if I'm going to speculate, I would say it didn't look like a serious knee injury, but he was kind of holding the lateral aspect of his left knee. Could be a meniscus tear. When I spoke to him later that day, he was wearing just a very simple brace, like an elastic brace, and saying he hyperextended his knee. But he did wind up leaving to go home and have surgery. Folks I talked to at the Shrine Bowl say they don't know that he's going to be ready for the combine, which is really unfortunate because he was just having an outstanding week of practice.
He's a little bit undersized, though, too, and doing some research on him. I think he mainly played last year more on the outside, but the year before that, I think logged quite a few snaps in the slot and all. So is this it seems like he's probably going to be best suited at the slot position, and unfortunately, because of the injury, he's going to probably be either a late round guy or undrafted. Would most of you agree with that?
Yeah, most of his reps in practice came in the slot. That's where he will play at the next level, and I agree that now that teams won't get to see him, work out at the combine, assuming that he can't recover in time, I think day 3 is probably where he's going to end up falling.
Steven, give me a lowdown on the defensive lineman. I know you mentioned Cam Horsley earlier, but Pittsburgh looking very much like they're going to draft defensive linemen early in this draft, maybe even double dip, as Dave Bryan has talked about. Who stood out in the trenches defensively?
On the interior defensive line, I really like CJ West. Another person who has that kind of weight that you look for, 314. I really liked what I saw from him, along with Tonka Hemingway. I know Tonka had a pretty decent performance in the game as well. Both of them, I think, are guys that, I know CJ West isn't the tallest guy, but I think both of them could add value at the next level on the interior as run defenders, and some versatility as pass rushers for both of them. And I think those guys really made consistent waves. I would like to say Nazir Stackhouse, but at times, especially earlier in the practices, he wasn't really a big impact as he was in the later practices, and I didn't really see much of him in the game.
Did Tonka not measure in?
Yeah, he didn't.
Okay.
Joe, jump in with your thoughts on the D-line.
Yeah, just one other guy who I thought really stood out throughout the week was Jordan Phillips out of Maryland. I think, coming into the week, he was a pretty highly touted defensive lineman there, probably one of the best, and he absolutely lived up to it. He won the Shrine Bowl Pat Tillman Award for his work in practice. He was continually beating guys. He's got an incredible, power speed combo. He's got a good array of moves on the interior. And he's got an incredible mentality. I talked to him, asked him about an interview, and where he said he would literally die for his team if that's what it took. And I asked him about that. He's like, I fully believe that. These guys always do so much for me. He's like, at any level. He incredibly impressive person. And throughout the week, just came away incredibly impressed with him. And I think, he probably played himself into a day 2 selection. If the Steelers go D-line in round 1, I would assume they don't double up in the second or the third, but maybe they do. But he's somebody I would love to see in the black and gold.
We'll kind of dial in on him. What is his best trait? Like, what does he do the best?
I think it's just power, the way he can kind of clog up the middle of the defense. And I mean, I think he's squatted 680 pounds or something like that. He was on the Feldman's freak list. So the way he defends against the run, like it was hard for teams to run up the middle when he was on the field. Like, it was near impossible. And then 1v1s, I mean, he was winning with his bull rush pretty repeatedly. He worked in a little finesse here and there, but I think just his power overall was really his standout trait for me.
Let me talk to the other mayor of the Shrine Bowl. Josh, how many is this for you? 4 or 5?
This is 4 for me.
All right, you and Mel. You had a good conversation with Mark Bruner, I take it. Former Steelers tight end, obviously a scout with the team, and all. And his son Carson Bruner at the Shrine Bowl this year. We know the Steelers like those bloodlines, everything along with that. Tell me about the conversation that you had with Mark Bruner, and then B, tell me about Carson Bruner, because I mean, it smells like if the Steelers go late inside linebacker, somebody that can help on special teams, or could potentially be, we'll see what happens with Cole Holcomb, obviously, and Landon Roberts this offseason with the Steelers. But could Carson Bruner be in their sights?
You, my friend, are on the same brainwave as me. I have him in my 7th round in my mock that comes out later this week. So yeah, I talked to Mark Bruner. I got stuck in an elevator with him a couple times last year. I use that term loosely. We weren't actually stuck, but he recognized me from previous years, and we were just chatting. I said, I'm a writer at Steelers Depot, and it was great that he recognized it and kind of said, "Oh, you guys track us all over the place," and so that's a kudos to you and Alex there, Dave. But yeah, I had a great conversation with Mark Bruner, and then I got to chat with Carson, I believe on Tuesday of the Shrine Bowl there towards the end. And we had an awesome half-hour conversation. I'll have a couple of pieces coming out of that, but he's just your old school linebacker. He's tough as nails. He played through, I believe, a separated shoulder the last 2 years. He wears a shoulder brace that he even had on in the Shrine Bowl. He's just old school linebacker, plays, fast and physical downhill, racks up tackles. He was Washington's defensive MVP this year in his first full year as a starter. He told me that up there in Washington the last few years, they kind of were doing a rotation, kind of like what the Steelers did this year with Landon Roberts and Peyton Wilson. So Bruner was playing roughly 45% of the snaps up there. But he struggles in coverage at times, but he's a guy that I think is going to be a really good special teams piece. He's all about the team. He's smart. We know the bloodlines. He was a legacy player at Washington. Obviously, Mark Bruner was an All-American there. So Carson had a lot of expectations on him going in. But the guy just makes plays. I know he was quiet at the Shrine Bowl, and again, it can be tough, especially for linebackers, having a huge impact there. But I really think that when he gets into a room with teams, he's going to blow them away in the interview. I think he's going to test relatively well. And having that last name and what that means in the NFL, I think it's going to open some doors for him. And I think he's the type of player that's going to seize upon those opportunities. And that could be in Pittsburgh. And, he he told me he had the interview with Dan Colbert and Kelvin Fisher, and he's known them since he was probably 7 years old, I think, roughly. He's been in the war room on draft day with the Steelers. He was there when Devin Bush was traded up for. So he's got some cool experiences behind the scenes with the Steelers, and everything's kind of been full circle with him. His dad played in the Shrine Bowl back in, I think, 95 when it was at Stanford. And then obviously Carson playing in the Shrine Bowl now. So just a really cool conversation with him, and definitely a guy to circle, not only for the bloodlines, but for the ability on special teams and the position he plays, especially with guys like Holcomb and Tyler Matakevich kind of being up in the air in Pittsburgh.
All right, so it's definitely an easy dart throw for people looking for a 6th or 7th round guy to fit into their mock drafts, right?
100%. It is a layup early on in the process, and I am not opposed to hitting those layups right now.
Yeah, for sure. Joe, give me some background on the safety group. Doesn't feel like a great class overall. I think it's a hidden need for Pittsburgh. Demonte Casey, a free agent, not much behind Minka, Deshaun Elliott. Anyone impress you at safety down there, Joe?
Yeah, one guy that I thought kind of played quietly pretty well was Craig Woodson out of Cal. I mean, there's a lot of Cal defensive backs there. Noel Williams is obviously the standout, but I thought Woodson made some plays. He had a few pass breakups in practice, and then in the game, he had an opportunity for an interception, but he dropped it. I thought Shamari Simmons from Arizona State throughout the week was, pretty fairly consistent. But overall, it wasn't really a great safety group. Nobody really pop. Shiloh Sanders didn't have a super great week in practice. He's, corner safety sort of guy. But I would say then, the number one guy that I thought stood out was Woodson. I also thought Elijah Clark from Syracuse. He had a few decent plays. I mean, he played aggressive. He was getting downhill. Coverage. There's a few lapses here and there throughout the week. So nothing crazy there. But Woodson to me was a guy that I thought of the safeties, he was the one that really caught my eye.
Joe, I'll follow up, but then if anyone else wants to jump in, feel free. Shiloh Sanders, is he a draftable guy? Sounds kind of more borderline, definitely day 3 type. The name carries a lot of weight. Obviously, that's Sanders' surname, but is Shiloh a draftable talent?
I think, for special teams value, he's probably worth a 6th or 7th round pick. I mean, he's an older prospect. I think he's going to be 25. So that kind of limits some of his upside there. But if you want somebody that's going to contribute on special teams late in the draft, I think, he's not a bad flyer to take. I think maybe the fact that he has the Sanders name and, some of the spectacle around that maybe it could, I don't know if that will work in his favor or work against him if teams don't want to deal with, Dion Jr. filming, every move like he was doing at Shrine Bowl. But as a special teamer, I think he's probably worth drafting.
And then just give me information on 2 corners. Zy Alexander, mentioned him a bit earlier. He's not quite the avatar type of corner that Pittsburgh has gravitated towards, but he's got height and I think a frame to add. And then with Revel coming off the injury, did he fully participate? What's his status? What's his outlook looking like? To anyone who wants to jump in, feel free.
Yeah, so I talked to Alexander. So he had an up and down week, but generally I thought he was more good than bad. As Josh talked about, Mumpfield cooked him on that one-on-one route. There's a few times he got beat, but there's a few plays, physical at the catch point. He made I think he had a nice pass breakup in the end zone on one play where he kind of recovered using some of his speed. I do like him. I think he's probably, a 3rd, 4th round pick. He had a lot of production at LSU over the last 2 years. And then as far as Revel, he didn't do anything throughout the week. He wasn't in the media room when we were doing interviews.
Yeah, I don't even think we saw him down there, to be honest with you, Alex.
Was he actually there? Does anyone know if he actually attended? He just wasn't visible? Do we have any idea?
I think he did have some meetings with teams. I think he was there, but but we didn't see him at all throughout the week.
He was there and he participated in the weigh-in. I think he spoke with teams and that was about it.
Okay, because that may be one of the top guys to go if that rehab goes well. He was projected a 1st round possibility before the injury, so just wanted to mention that. Dave, go ahead.
Mel, who was the top? Make this Mel and Steven. Mel, who was the top all-around tight end down at the Shrine Bowl? And whoever she doesn't choose, Steven, who would be next on the list? Mel.
Steven's going to be unhappy with me because my favorite tight end is also his favorite tight end.
Oh.
which is probably also Josh's favorite tight end, which is Aronde Gadsden from Syracuse. He just looked great in every practice. Big frame, good hands, good catching, and he just stood out in almost every drill he participated in. Very similar to last year, this was a very good tight end class, and there was a lot of talent there. I actually spoke with Luke Lachey out of Iowa, and he's probably going to be a later round pick, but I would almost call him like a poor man's Pat Freiermuth. Not necessarily something the Steelers might be looking for, but I think that he's going to be good late round quality.
I'm old enough to remember his father playing in the NFL. Ronde Gadsden.
Sure, he won a Super Bowl with the Washington Redskins.
Steven, would be the next best all around tight end at the Shrine Bowl?
I mean, I really liked what I saw from Jalen Conyers, Texas Tech guy, 6'3", 263. I wasn't a massive fan of any of these tight ends. Aronde really did stand out, especially with how strong his hands were, so he would have been my choice. But Jalen Conyers, I liked what I saw from him. I'm pretty sure he had a good day in the game as well, if I remember correctly. At least, respectively to what the West did. But he stood out in the team scrimmages to me. He stood out on the sideline just watching him interact with his teammates. Jalen Conyers, I think, was a big winner from the week of practices.
Can he block, Steven? He's a big guy, but those Texas Tech guys sometimes can't put their hand in the dirt.
If you're looking for a blocker, I would look more maybe the Luke Lockie from Iowa route. Obviously Iowa, of course,
Yeah.
But
Right.
Not really Jalen Conyers. Though.
Okay.
I was going to go to Luke Lockie out of Iowa because of, you look at the side. Wasn't there a little bit of buzz about him prior to the Shrine Bowl? Did he just, give me the 411 about the week that Luke had there? Somebody.
I thought Luke had a solid week. He had an ankle fracture in 2023, which required surgery, and he didn't blow stats off the board in his senior year. But mostly he's asked to block more than catch. I think he's got a good release off the line. He can get separation. He can catch the ball, and he's a willing blocker. I thought he's never going to blow away the competition, but I thought he's very consistent.
Anybody else want to chime in on Luke? Go ahead, finish up, Mel.
I was going to say, and he almost looked like bookends next to Ole Miss, Caden Prieskorn. They were often practicing together, and it was like frickin' frack. But then when you actually watch them in practice and compare them, Prieskorn is just not as reliable a pass catcher. And he did unfortunately turn the ball over deep in his own territory in the Shrine Bowl game.
As we start to wind things down, the last question I really had was, I'm just going to go through you guys name by name. Give me the one prospect who just felt like a Steelers type of guy, the SpongeBob Squidward meme of like pointing Steeler, that type of guy. Josh, I'll start with you. Who felt like this guy has a good chance to become a Steeler?
I'll go with Kobe Bryant. I know that's probably the easy answer, but they have a need at corner. He's a guy that, there was a lot of buzz about him throughout the week. He's a physical guy. He had a really strong week. The Steelers met with him, obviously. I know Joe had the article. I know he's undersized. I get that. I get the weight concerns. I think he weighed less than Emmanuel Forbes did, but that's the guy that if you really want to find someone long-term opposite Joey Porter Jr. that has that dog mentality, that can thrive on an island, he's the guy you go after. He'll have to prove at the NFL level that he can stay healthy and erase some of those durability concerns with his size, but he's got the resume coming out of college, and that's the guy that late day 2, early day 3, it would not shock me if his name is called.
With a name like Kobe Bryant, you better have that dog mentality to back it up for sure. Steven, who felt like the most Steeler type of Steeler down there at the Shrine Bowl?
Somebody that I had my eye on, and I think would be a great addition to Pittsburgh is Oregon receiver Trayshawn Holden. Um, just kind of his overall play style, I think, would be really well. Receiver obviously could help Pittsburgh out a lot. He's about 6'1" and a half, 203. And overall, he's just a well-rounded player. He had some off the field issues a little bit, but I was talking to him through that, and he had nothing that worried me. I had my best interview with him. He was a great player. There was some, mix with him at the Shrine Bowl where he got into some issues. But I think that was just his competitive juices. He's a really competitive guy. Dylan Gabriel talked about his growth. Dan Lanning talked about his growth, and his entire college career at Oregon has just been about rebuilding kind of what he tarnished a little bit with his off the field issues. And just with my conversation, I do have a lot of confidence that he has grown as a person. And that was a big part of my interview with him. As a player, after the catchability, he has really solid hands. He has the frame you're looking for. I think he is a great talent that you can get late in the draft that people are going to overlook due to those character concerns he did show a little bit.
Mel, who felt like a Steeler, and we should mention as well, and you pointed this out, Jordan Clark, son of Ryan Clark, was there, did not participate. I don't know if he interacted with the media at all, but Steeler and mention Jordan Clark as well, if there's anything to expand on that.
I actually was able to sit down with Jordan Clark. He did not play because of his long season going into the national championship, but he was at every practice with his group, listening to the coaches, interacting with the media, very much a participant. And just an incredible young man. But with that said, I would say the person who felt most like a Steeler to me would have to be Iowa linebacker Jay Higgins. Unfortunately, he didn't practice this week, which I think was a business decision, but he was there to interact with the media. I watched a fair amount of his college tape. He just jumps off the page. He's amazing personality, loves football. He has an endless motor on the field. He's a downhill thumper linebacker. We within our group, we sort of said he's reminiscent of a Landon Roberts. He is going to be someone who brings a physical play to the game, and I could totally see him in the Steelers locker room.
Yeah, Pittsburgh could certainly use more of that. And Joe, bring us home who felt like the biggest type of Steeler.
Yeah, I'm going to double back here to Jordan Phillips, 6'01", 318. Mike Locksley at Maryland compared him to Daron Payne. When I talked to him, he absolutely loves Daron Payne. He loved that comparison. Mike Tomlin, Mike Locksley have a good relationship. So there's a little bit of that connection there. Mike Tomlin likes his Maryland kids. And just the power that he possessed. And I think, him learning under Cam Hayward, he could really become a stud. And he told me too that another guy that he likes to watch is Javon Hargrave, kind of similar in the way the two of them play as well. So a guy that I think would not be surprised if he's on Pittsburgh's radar, and I think would fit in seamlessly to Pittsburgh's defense.
Who we didn't talk about edge rushers, even though the Steelers don't have a high need for it. They could potentially add an edge late, especially one maybe that can help out on special teams to be maybe that number 4 guy behind obviously T.J. Watt, Alex Highsmith, and Nick Herbig. I came across Johnny Walker, not the liquor, but the player out of Missouri during the actual Shrine Bowl game. Looked like, this guy looks like an outside linebacker, 6'2", 5'8", 246, nice long arms, 33 inches, 10-inch hands, showed some nice bend and kind of a pass rush plan, if you will, in the limited tape that I've seen so far. Was he the best kind of, and I'm not talking about kind of those 4-3 base ends, but for an outside linebacker type, Josh, I'll go with you. What was he the best kind of fit at edge for the Steelers at the Shrine Bowl? And if not, who was?
Yeah, I think so. He really looked good throughout the week. He just was a different mover. You can see it up close, the way he was able to go through the drills. He was just so much smoother than the rest of the edge guys there. I definitely think his future is kind of that 3-4 stand-up edge. Another guy that really stood out, Elijah Ponder from Cal Poly, I thought he had a really solid week. It was quiet, but every time I watched him in the drills, he was showing up. He showed up in team. He showed up in the game. A guy named like Antoine Powell Ryland could be a name for the Steelers to know at that edge position. I think he had 16 and a half sacks last year at Virginia Tech. Didn't really do much down there this week overall, but that's a name to focus on. But going into the Shrine Bowl, and I was disappointed he wasn't able to participate, was Quay Robinson from Alabama. If you want that number 4 outside linebacker who can give you 5 to 10 snaps and he'll be a playmaker on special teams, that's the guy. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, went to Alabama, didn't play much defensively the first 3 years, which, in some instances that could be a knock on a guy, but he was behind a lot of good talent. And then in this year, prior to the injury, I think he had 4.5 sacks in the first few games of the year, but has a ton of special teams abilities. It was just disappointing that he wasn't able to participate. But yeah, Johnny Walker, you are spot on there. That is the guy to kind of circle out of this edge group.
All right, I'll my last question for each one of them, and then Alex, you can wrap this up however you want to here. Who was the player that you were maybe most high on or most excited to see going into the Shrine Bowl that actually practiced and all that ended up maybe disappointing you or didn't live up to the expectations of maybe what you had going into the Shrine Bowl? I'll start with why don't we go Mel, Steven, Josh, and then Joe.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
You want me to come back to you, Mel?
Yeah, come back to me because it's hard for me to say that anybody disappointed me, but I'll go quick at the end. Oh, actually, you know what? I will say tight end Mitchell Evans out of Notre Dame. And to his credit, despite the fact that he played in the national championship, he did practice for a day or two. But maybe he shouldn't have because he's probably just tired after 16 games this season, and he totally underwhelmed. That was probably the one I was excited to see and then underwhelmed.
Steven, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few guys that kind of drew my interest, diving into them and then didn't really perform. I thought Georgia's Chaz Chambliss was one of them. I had a pretty poor interview with him. He just wasn't really giving me much when I was asking his questions. And then he didn't stand out at all, in my opinion. That's probably what I would go with. Zay Frazier from UTSA was another guy that I was extremely excited. He had great ball production, and he has a massive frame, being 6'2" and a half, 189. And again, at times he flashed. He had great personality. I had a great interview with him, but it wasn't really that standout. And other guys like the Udell corner, Tyron Herring, Zay Frazier kind of just falls in the group and doesn't stand out.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. There weren't a lot of guys that really struggled, but the name I'll give you here is Cameron Silman Craig, the safety from Colorado. I was pretty high on him going into the year, going into the Shrine Bowl. I thought he had a solid year for the Buffs in 2024. A lot of people that I've talked to, just going back to my Colorado ties, they said he was the heart and soul of that program, and he was going to bring a lot of energy. He was going to make a lot of plays. And he was really quiet throughout the week. I don't know if he just wasn't comfortable in the environment. You're struggling to grasp the playbook, whatever it was. He didn't do much that really drew much positive attention. And that was a bit disappointing. So he's a guy that I want to go back and really watch closely now that we have all the practice tape and all the game tape. I really want to go back and watch him and kind of figure out what happened and why. Because the 2024 tape, like I said, throughout the year in the Big 12 was really good.
Joe, bring us home.
Yeah, I'll go with Louisville receiver Ja'Cory Brooks. He had a really nice start to his career at Alabama, and then he transferred to Louisville for this past season, had over 1,000 yards. I kind of expected him to be a guy that really stood out among the receiver group, and he didn't really. I mean, he made a few nice plays early on, and then I think he kind of faded throughout the week. I think he had a drop. Just somebody that didn't really catch my eye the way I thought that he would. So I was left a little bit disappointed with what I saw out of him.
Guys, thank you so much. Fantastic information. Wanted to do this in an hour, basically hit that right on the nose. You guys crushed it down there. So much just valuable information, our eyes, our ears. And so want to thank you guys for it's a hard week down there. I know it's a lot going on, but I think you guys really gave good perspective. So appreciate it. And we'll certainly have you guys on hopefully before the draft to get your final pre-draft thoughts.
Yeah, I concur. Thank you for the hard work again, and glad we were able to make it happen with so many of you again.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Our special thanks to the crew that was down there at the Shrine Bowl with Melanie Friedlander, Josh Carney, Joe Clark, Stephen Pavelka, and Troy Montgomery. Just great information and really hit on every question I had about what was going on down there, Dave.
Yeah, that flowed really, really well. Got a lot of additional info out of those. Crossed off a lot of questions that I had for the group as well too, and certainly appreciate the time and effort that they put in. Really got a lot out of that as a whole. So I'm sure we'll have some, if not all, those participants back on another podcast prior to the draft.
All right, Dave, my first Steelers 2025 mock draft came out on Tuesday, and as usual, everyone loved it. Zero critiques. Everyone just said, put this one in the books. Now, there was certainly some debate, but that always happens with mock drafts, and that's okay. So run through these, and it's the first time out, and remember, this is what I think the team will do, not what I personally would do, and we'll get a lot more clarity before or after free agency, combine, pro day, et cetera, et cetera. But in round one, 21st overall, I went Derek Harmon, defensive end from Oregon. We know Pittsburgh's going to take a D lineman early in the draft, assuming they don't make a big splash in free agency, get younger. Harmon can play up and down the line, really profiles perfectly as that base defensive end. He's productive, he's athletic, well-rounded. Assume they're going to release Larry Ogunjobi, need more D-line help. Cam Hayward about to be 36. They're going to take D-line. The question is who? I went Harmon.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with the direction and the player that you went there. Definitely a fit. I guess the biggest pushback maybe would be from the people is will he still be on the board come that pick? And that's obviously conversation that you get on nearly any player, especially when you're talking about 20th pick or after there. So I fully get why you went that direction there.
Second round probably had more controversy. I went Will Howard, the quarterback from Ohio State. I've touted Howard, have a video breakdown on him on the site this morning. I think this team will keep their eyes peeled for a quarterback. Would not shock me if they went day 2 range on one. Some said this is too early for Howard, but I think what quarterbacks do get pushed up. Daniel Jeremiah considered him a top 50 player. I think with some of the struggles Jalen Milroe has had, reportedly none of the quarterbacks out at the Senior Bowl had a great week, didn't stand out. Jackson Dart, Milroe, etc. I think Howard could be the number 3 quarterback drafted this year behind Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. And to me, putting him at 52 is not unreasonable for a third quarterback.
And I know you're not married to this. This is just the first mock draft that you had. And I think when you look at this quarterback class as a whole, it is, at least this early in the stage, easy to agree with you that Will Howard could potentially be the 3rd or 4th quarterback off the board. Quarterbacks obviously get pushed up because of the importance of the position. It is, at least this early on, kind of hard to imagine him sliding into where the Steelers pick in the 3rd round there. And the quantifier is if the Steelers were to address the quarterback position in the top half of this draft and did not specifically do it in the 1st round, it would make a lot of sense that they would have to take Howard in the 2nd round as being that 3rd, 4th best quarterback in this draft. So I understand why you went that way. Not totally convinced that they will go that way, but once again, if a quarterback was drafted by the Steelers in this draft in the first the first couple of days there, I can understand why you penciled in Howard there.
And I like his game. I think his touch, his accuracy, his ball placement. I mean, so there's some questions over ability to drive the football and really get RPMs on it, but overall, I think his game was consistent, smart. And yes, he was blessed by a ton of talent at Ohio State, but you saw the same traits and skill set at Kansas State, where he was for most of his career before transferring in 2024. And listen, Pittsburgh's old school. They love a winner. Will Howard won that'll draw them to Will Howard. All right, Dave.
Had you not gone Howard there and in lieu of potentially ruining your own mock draft positionally at that point, if you wouldn't have gone Will Howard or a quarterback there, what way would you have, what player would you have put in that spot?
Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't know if I had a great second place spot there. Maybe a running back, Marion Hampton from North Carolina. Like I said, I think Pittsburgh will take a back in that 2 to 4 round range. So maybe him, maybe a receiver. But I didn't know if there was anybody I loved at receiver. So probably another skill guy.
All right. And let's see, running back in the third, right?
Yeah, going back-to-back Buckeyes here with Travion Henderson from Ohio State. I think Pittsburgh, according to reports, and it makes sense, looking for some speed, some playmaking, and Henderson certainly can offer that. I've been actually watching his tape, have a report on him coming for probably tomorrow or the next day. He's a playmaker for sure. Speed to gain the edge. Not a lot of power, maybe not as much wiggle with this game as you would think, but can certainly break out into the open and outrun second, third level defenders. Good in pass protection, can catch, and so Henderson Warren pairing, a little different style. I think Pittsburgh will have interest.
Where's your wide receiver at in this thing, Alex?
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it.
All right. Go ahead.
Round 4, going corner here, Zy Alexander from LSU. Not quite the avatar type of corner that Pittsburgh looks for. Doesn't have that elite length, but he's tall. He's got some ability to add to his frame right now. Has shown a nose for the ball throughout his career. Corner's really tricky. I don't know how Pittsburgh's going to handle this one. Will they re-sign Dante Jackson? Will they make a splash in free agency? Will they draft somebody? Got a couple of needs there at slot corner, outside corner. How much do you trust Corey Trice to stay healthy despite having a lot of intriguing physical tools? So mid-round corner is kind of where I came in at.
All right.
And
I need to watch more of him. I haven't. I know who he is. I haven't watched much of him yet.
Mentioned him in that Shrine Bowl conversation a little bit briefly. Round 5, Dylan Fairchild, the guard from Georgia. I know some might sit there and say a guard, is that a big need for this team? I think it could be a sneaky position the way it was last year with Mason McCormick, given that Isaac Seumalo, last year of his contract. Pittsburgh took McCormick knowing that James Daniels was in last year of his deal, was unlikely to return. And so could the same calculation happen here with Fairchild? Not a great guard class overall to my understanding, but I wouldn't be shocked if a guard came in on day 3.
All right. The only pushback I would say is what did a wide receiver crop look like at even that spot?
Yeah, I think this receiver class is not great. There's some interesting round 1 guys, and the class really falls off. So just to address that, I did not have a true receiver in my mock. What I'm assuming is that they're going to add a veteran in free agency. So whether that's a Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, somebody else, like that's how I think they're going to address it. And you could still certainly draft a receiver, but if you do have a top 4 of Pickens, veteran addition, Calvin Austin, and Roman Wilson in year 2 for a run-minded offense, I think Pittsburgh could work with that.
All right, why don't you, for time consideration, roll through your final picks here.
Yeah, and there's some debate about how many 7th-round picks the Pittsburgh has. We'll have to dig into it ourselves some. A lot of outlets, including the Post-Gazette, Tankathon, which is the website I use to get the full NFL draft order, has Pittsburgh having 3 7th-round picks. They got 2 in the Kenny Pickett deal. I know they did trade away 7th for Preston Smith, but Tankathon was still considering that and giving Pittsburgh 3 7th-rounders, but I think over the cap only has 2. I believe Bob Labriola said they only have 2, and so a little bit of confusion there, but I have 3 for this mock. I got Jacquez Stewart from Toledo, who's really going to be a return guy. He was a great returner in the NCAA, led the MAC in kick return, averaged 3 times, led the entire NCAA in 2024, had a couple return touchdowns, and so Pittsburgh whiffing on Cordell Patterson, but they still need kick return help. They were last in kick return yardage this year. They were one of only 4 teams to have a worse average this year than last year under the new dynamic kickoff rules. They got to change that. Stewart can be that kind of guy. Aubrey Burks with my other 7th-round pick, safety type, needs some safety depth there. He got hurt a lot this year, Burks did, had better 2023 tape. And then if they do have a 3rd, 7th-rounder, I went CJ Dupree, the tight end from Alabama, to be a big-bodied blocker, help replace Michael Pruitt.
All right, how many A+ grades did you get from I imagine a lot of pushback because A, the wide receiver, B, probably because you had the quarterback in there.
Yeah, I don't think there were too many A pluses. I think some people like the Henderson pick, but some certainly questioned Howard. Some questioned if Harmon was worth a 21st overall pick. Certainly some question receiver. It just, to me, this receiver class is not great. So if you don't take one in the first round, you don't take Buka or something like that. Who are you going to get in the mid rounds? I mean, there are some names, but this is not as deep of a class as say last year.
And obviously, in this scenario, you're assuming George Pickens is back in 2025. You're expecting Calvin Austin to take another step, and you're expecting a lot out of Roman Wilson, along with whoever, whatever veteran you either get in free agency or trade for.
Right. If you take, say, a round 3 receiver, and if you assume they add a veteran like I am, where does that rookie fit in? Behind, in between Pickens, the veteran, Calvin, Roman Wilson in year 2, and the rookie for a team that, runs only a little bit 11 personnel.
At your heart of hearts, though, this mock aside, where are you percentage of where you think the Steelers will draft a wide receiver in this thing? Knowing what you know, obviously got free agency to go right now, but what percentage chance would you give the Steelers not drafting a wide receiver, regardless of how this thing plays out?
I mean, I think history tells us that's pretty low. Wasn't You had the stat about how often they've taken receivers in any draft class, and it's 75% of the time. So the odds are probably relatively low, but I do think there's a case to be made. This is not the year to be attacking receiver in the draft. This is the year to attack it in free agency, given what I think are some options out there, and Pittsburgh certainly has the cap space to spend it.
If you were to change anything, would it be to take the quarterback out of the second and put a wide receiver in there, or no?
I think second round quarterback, third round quarterback makes sense in terms of what they could do. Could you flip Henderson and Howard? You could. Could you put a different defensive lineman at 21? Maybe I'm a little too attached to Harmon. That's possible. Could I got in a slot corner? I've been banging the drum for slot corner. So I don't know. The first mock, I'm not too focused on like what do I want to change, because it is just kind of the first time out. There's so much for us to learn. This will evolve so much over the next 2 months. And so it just kind of a get your feet wet, get the conversation started type of exercise.
All right.
All right, Dave, that's my mock. Next one will come out probably, I don't know, sometime in March. So it'll be a little bit before the next one. Anything else here to discuss, Dave?
No, I think we got most of it, and we'll put off any reader emails here for until the Friday show at least, because we have run a little bit long here with the roundtable and all like that. So I'm not seeing. Are you seeing any other news come across here before we get out of here?
I hadn't checked in a couple minutes, but no, don't think we'll see much. Again, we'll have our Senior Bowl discussion and roundtable on the Friday show.
All right, look forward to that as well too. All right, good job today. Had some good conversations about Kupp and the Gerry Dulac report, and obviously the roundtable from the Shrine Bowl. So appreciate all those guys chiming in and spending time with us on this Wednesday morning. So until the Friday show, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button as well. Follow the directions that way. So until Friday, should be a fun show then as well. Thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.